In an economy that's kind of always been built on and reliant on oil and gas, we really needed knowledge workers. And so we said, what if we put out a call to knowledge workers in the form of remote workers across the country and said, we'll give you $10,000, you come and do your remote job in Tulsa for a year. And almost overnight, there was about 10,000 applications, a huge reception, a lot of very free media across the country, and really put Tulsa on the map in a different way. And then, of course, the pandemic happened.
Known as the biggest town you'll ever experience, with its unique historical background, Tulsa is home to a diverse range of people and businesses with a thriving economy, delicious eats, nightlife, and entertainment for all ages. Tulsa is also home to business titans, entrepreneurs, artists, and foodies. Whether you're considering a move to Tulsa or just wanting to learn more about the place you call home, the Tulsa is Home podcast is for you.
Welcome to another episode of the Tulsa is Home podcast. Today, it's a little bit different format. We get to sit down with Justin Harlan with the Tulsa Remote initiative. And so, it's not a business ownership, but you are heavily invested in the Tulsa business community. And I feel like I have a ton of questions.
Awesome.
And then people that we talk to, even from out of state, always ask me about the Tulsa Remote program. And so hopefully this will help educate me, and then also viewers and listeners to some of the details and all that. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with Tulsa Remote.
Sure. Thanks for having me today. Appreciate the opportunity to get the word out. So I've been in Tulsa for about 20 years. Grew up in the Kansas City area. Went to school at the University of Tulsa, which is what brought me down here in 2004. Graduated from college and started working in nonprofits. So helped start the region for Teach for America here in Tulsa, expanded that across the state, worked there for about 7.5 years, and then led an organization called Reading Partners, which is a literacy organization that's focused on leveraging volunteers to help young kids across the city learn to read. The COVID drastically changed that model, and so we kind of were having to revamp our curriculum and recruit, volunteers in a different way on Zoom. And so a lot of changes, got through that, and then was really just kind of ready for something different. And I'd always, worked directly with the George Kaiser Family Foundation, and always really been focused on talent attraction through Teach for America or even Reading Partners through our AmeriCorps programs. And so, I've really become passionate about just getting people here and helping them see the beauty and magic of this place. And there was an opportunity to help Tulsa Remote grow and scale responsibly coming out of the pandemic and experiencing a lot of growth. And so I jumped at that opportunity and haven't looked back. So It's been great.
So when did Tulsa Remote officially start?
So the idea was born in 2018.
Okay.
First group of folks came in 2019. And really it was an effort to diversify our economy and build up a workforce that's resilient for the future. At the time, and obviously a very different world, feels like ages ago, but it was
pre-COVID is everything.
There was only about 1% of the workforce that was working remotely, but we knew that a good majority of the remote workers at that time were knowledge workers, which is in an economy that's kind of always been built on and reliant on oil and gas. We really needed knowledge workers. And so we said, what if we put out a call to knowledge workers in the form of remote workers across the country and said, we'll give you $10,000, you come and do your remote job in Tulsa for a year. And almost overnight, there was about 10,000 applications, a huge reception, a lot of very free media across the country, and really put Tulsa on the map in a different way. And then, of course, the pandemic happened, and it's like, all right, now our pool of people or our target audience is so huge. And so how do we capitalize on that? And so in that first year, 2019, there was about 70 people that came. 2020 was about 380. 2021 was about 950.
Okay.
And then we just surpassed 3,500 folks that have moved to Tulsa through the program. And that doesn't include, spouses and kids and family members, which we can dive into. But it's, obviously in a lot of ways kind of right place, right time. But also I think it was an opportunity to really showcase what Tulsa had to offer folks that may not have given it a look to begin with.
So I saw a stat on there, and I don't know if it was a recent stat or older, but over 500 million of revenue for the city coming in through the program. Is that?
Yeah, the economic impact has been incredible. So this is as of the end of 2023. So we're actually right now, when we're recording this, kind of in the midst of pulling numbers for 2024, which we'll have more on that soon. But as of the end of 2023, there was about 500 million in direct labor income. So that's just salaries, people were bringing in. We also know that for every $10,000 that we're spending on the foundation, there's about a $12, $13 return on that investment to the city, which is awesome. And what I think is relevant, especially for a local audience, is we're bringing in jobs that people are not taking from others because they've got remote jobs, and adding a job to the economy. Well, of course, those high earners, which is typically who we're bringing in, are then going to go spend their money at coffee shops or bars and have hotel rooms that are reserved or concert tickets. And all of that creates labor demand. So you got to hire more people at a local level in order to support that spending. And we know that there's been about 1,300 jobs created at a local level because of the spending of all the jobs we're bringing in. So, just the ripple effect of the program is really something that obviously when we were 70 people, we had no idea it would get to this size and scale, but it's really been an amazing thing for the city economically.
Yeah. So you had about 10,000 applicants right off the bat, but then only, you said 75 or so came. How does that work? Were they not accepted, did not qualify on some level, or did they just kind of end up not pulling the trigger on it?
Well, I could probably answer that question a number of different ways, kind of depending on the year of the program. I'll tell you how it works now. I mean, I would say the vast majority of folks that apply, if you meet our basic eligibility requirements, which is you have to be 18 years old, you have to have a full-time remote job, and you have to have lived outside of the state of Oklahoma for at least a year. So the vast majority, if you apply and get through the application, you're going to get an interview, which is about a 20, 30-minute conversation with one of our staff members. And then you're most likely also going to get invited to come, which then is when the hard part begins. We then invite people to come on a visit. We actually pay $500 for them to come and visit Tulsa. Nice. We show them around for about 48 hours, or you can come on your own and we reimburse you for that too. But then it's, actually having somebody pack up their life and decide to relocate here that I think is kind of the hardest conversion. But at this point, we've gotten pretty good at like who we're looking for, what are the qualities in the person that we want to see, and then moving those people through as quickly as we can.
And what they're looking for too in a city. Yeah.
And then, when they're here and they visit, we try to give them a realistic picture of what Tulsa has to offer, so then they can make that informed decision as an adult and decide what's best for them.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yep.
Are there other cities that do this?
Yeah. There's about 70 programs like this now across the country. There's not any that I would say are a city that's as amazing as Tulsa. I mean, we definitely have some advantages as it relates to just quality of life. A lot of them are smaller towns or, just different cities. And then we also obviously have the benefit of having the foundation dollars in partnership with state funding, which I think just allows us to kind of scale and provide resources that other programs can't. So the next biggest program that we're seeing is around a couple hundred folks that they've moved. And like I mentioned earlier, we're closer to 3,500.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. The timing of the pandemic and all the remote working, that's kind of crazy.
I mean, there's a lot of things that really suffered during the pandemic, obviously, but it was great for, toilet paper or whatever else we were running out of at the grocery store. Great for Tiger King, but great for Tulsa Remote, but obviously a lot of rough things came out of that too. But it really was an opportunity, I think, for cities to ask themselves, like, is the traditional economic development strategy the right one? And obviously it's traditionally been businesses. We're going to roll out incentives for businesses in hopes of getting businesses here. And what happens then? When a business leaves, you typically are having those jobs leave with them. And this is, I think, really we shouldn't take lightly the risk that we took in saying, you know what, we're going to try things a little differently. Let's go after the individual that can bring their job with them. And in bringing 3,500 individuals, we now know that there's going to be some that leave. It's just not going to be a good fit for them or whatever else. But we still know we're maintaining 90% of those folks in year 2, and there's a bit of turnover from there. But we know that the vast majority of people who came since 2019 are still here today. And that's a far less risky economic development model, which has really helped Tulsa be resilient even through the pandemic.
For sure.
Yeah.
So how do you get the word out to so many people nationwide so quickly? Like that, was it a lot of just other news nationwide news outlets? Or?
Yeah. I would say initially it was kind of this idea that a city was paying you to move there, and it really had never been seen before, and that got a lot of attention. We've figured out new ways to kind of get that story in front of folks. Now it's like about telling the member stories. Who are the folks that are moving to Tulsa, and what were they looking for, and what have they found to actually receive? And then now we're kind of, I'd say, entering into this new phase, which is like, we have research, we have data, the economic data that says how the city is benefiting, the tax dollars, we have the local jobs. There's a number of ways that we're contributing to the local economy. And so now there's other cities that are saying, oh man, it wasn't this cool kitschy concept, but it's actually something that's paying dividends for the city. Like, how could we replicate this? And so I'd say there's been multiple phases. At the heart of it has always been our members' stories and our ability to tell those well. And we try to do that through a number of different ways and platforms, whether it's national media or just local blogs and podcasts.
Yeah, so a quick plug for your podcast. What's it called?
Yeah, so we do a podcast that you can look up called Remote Revelations. We typically tell members stories. We also talk a bit about the remote worker tips and tricks. And we do kind of a number of different sub brands within that overall podcast, but you can find us on Spotify or Apple Music, wherever you find your podcasts. It's a lot of fun. Yeah,
awesome. Are there any particular partnerships, whether business-wise or maybe one of your members, that you're just particularly proud of, that really stands out, and you're like, yeah, this is an exact success story of what we're after?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I would say the most natural partnership is with what used to be called 36 Degrees North, is now, they just rebranded to Gradient and opened up a beautiful new facility, 115,000 square foot. All of our members get 36 months of membership dues covered at Gradient. Awesome. It's going to take me a little bit to get used to that name change, but and I'd say that has really helped the community that we're looking for come to life in different ways, where we're really focused on out of office hours. How do you get people to connect to organizations or people that are going to help them plant roots here in the city? We also can lean on and rely on Gradient to say we're actually doing a lot of the same stuff during the business day, and even just as a remote worker, often feeling isolated working out of your home, oftentimes those types of spaces can kind of open up those different collisions that might lead to something beautiful.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yep.
So we talked about membership growth. What's on the horizon for the program, Tulsa Remote, and is there anything this year that's going to be different, or are there goals that you guys have set for reaching people?
Yeah, we certainly have goals. We're hoping to bring in another 700 folks this year in 2025. We also are
compared to how many last year was that?
About the same.
Okay.
Yeah, about the same. We obviously are focused on retention too. It's not just about getting people here, but keeping them around in Tulsa. But I think bigger scale, and I think more applicable to the folks listening to this, we're really considering what has worked well with Tulsa Remote and how do we expand that to more Tulsans, and at the heart of what has made us successful is not just the fact that we're paying people to move here. I mean, that gets them here, that might get their attention, it might cover those moving costs, but at the end of the day, what's keeping people around is this place and the connections and community that we're able to foster. And so for us, we're just thinking about, like, how do we do that for more people and not just have access limited to a certain few to networking opportunities or social opportunities, but really expand that to more Tulsans. And so we are growing and building the work that Experience Tulsa has done. You might have seen them in social media. If not, go check them out on Instagram. But they've kind of started with a series of interviews with famous Tulsans that kind of telling folks, what their favorite things to do around the city are. And we're thinking more holistically about what those events could look like, what that marketing could look like to get more people to Tulsa in different ways, not that just our remote workers, but other niche industries, and also to expand those opportunities for people who have been here their whole lives. And we're looking forward to just how that plays out and how we can take what we've learned at Tulsa Remote and do even bigger and better things with it.
Awesome. So, being in Tulsa, and people who maybe have grown up here and very prideful of the state, the city, and just really the values that we have in Oklahoma, and just in general. So some people actually push back on other people from other backgrounds and beliefs coming into Tulsa. So touch on that as far as, do you feel like that has, what kind of impact that has had on the community? Positive, negative,
Yeah.
And then maybe your word to people who maybe view that.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. It's not the first I've heard that question, so you're not, hurting any feelings. I know that there's kind of that, belief out there. I mean, to me, I think it's a fascinating question or mindset for a couple of different reasons. So one is, typically when I introduce myself to someone and I'm kind of doing my gauge, I'm not just like, hey, I'm Justin, what's your name? All right, tell me about your values or beliefs. It's not something that we dig into. And so to judge somebody that's moving here based on what they might believe and what you think they might believe, I think is a little bit shallow.
Yeah.
I also think that there's kind of this notion that the people come from different states or the big cities that we might be attracting people from only think one way. And that's certainly damaged Oklahoma's brand in a lot of ways too. And so I would tell us to, if we want more people here, we also, should be open-minded about the fact that no matter where you're from, blue state, red state, whatever, there's going to be a wide range of beliefs and people. And I've lived in Tulsa for 20 years and can think of a lot of different ways that people have looked or people that they've loved or the values that they have internally. And to put us into one, specific persona, I think is not only dangerous, but I would ask ourselves, is that actually what we want? Because it's not what we're experiencing right now. And I think that's beautiful in a lot of ways. And then I'd say, in addition, we've actually done some research over the last few years with Harvard. And we put up this event called Tulsa Idea Challenge, and we invited folks to come out if you wanted to learn a bit about how to take your idea and build it into something really great. And where
was that done?
This was done at Oklahoma State University in Tulsa. This was a couple falls ago. And what folks didn't know is that behind the scenes, we were actually researching the combination of pairings that were going to build up the ideas. So we had a bunch of new Tulsans. We had a bunch of longtime Tulsans. And then we also had some pairs that were a new Tulsan with a longtime Tulsan. And everybody was assigned randomly, but you just basically walked in the door and met your partner, and then you built up a business idea. And what we were assessing is there a pair that rises to the top that's more effective?
What'd you find?
And we found that it was the combination pairing that was by far the most successful and social driven. And for us, that might be surprising, but when you really step back and think about that, it's okay, so the longtime Tulsan obviously has a ton of community context. You have relationships that have been built in place and people that you know. And then the person that might be new to the city has maybe lived a different life or has different experiences and has context for where they might be coming from, where they might have thought about things differently than what we have thought about in order to solve a specific problem. And in isolation, those two people can only do so much. But when you bring them together, it's really, I think, the beauty of that pair that makes that idea rise to the top, and it really makes it an effective business plan. And I would just challenge us as Tulsans, to think about our city in a similar way, where it's we can't do this alone. And I'd say at all of the beautiful points of our story, of our city's story, it's been folks that are coming together, kind of being innovative, being resilient, and doing this work despite differences where we might see differences as a threat. I would actually encourage us to lean into that as something that can make us even more brilliant as a city.
Awesome.
Yep.
So what's some advice you have for somebody considering Tulsa?
I would say, be clear on what you're looking for, and then I have never said that Tulsa's for everybody, but what I do know is that Tulsa is a city on the rise. I think we've got a lot of momentum right now. It's a big city that's big enough to do the things you're looking for in maybe your bigger city. Professional sports, awesome music scene, lots of James Beard nominations every year. But then you also don't have to deal with the headaches. You can get around pretty easily when there's not some major construction project going on. It's fairly affordable even in the midst of rising housing costs across the country to find a place to live. You can get more space for your money, and there's financial freedom and there's also time that comes with moving here, depending on where you're moving from, obviously. But I think it really, that financial freedom and time opens up opportunity. And I think that we've seen that time and time again with our members. And I think if that's what you're looking for in life and really thinking about the quality of life that you want, I think Tulsa is an awesome place for a lot of people.
Awesome. So where do people go to either learn more, apply? Do you have a cap per year, or is it open-ended as long as you qualify?
Yeah, it's open-ended. We'd love to exceed our goals.
Yeah.
TulsaRemote.com is a great place to go. We're also on all of the social media platforms. You can just find us at Tulsa Remote. And, I would just plug our social media. Even if you're a longtime Tulsan, we are really trying to curate content that helps people, see the spots to go and the places to visit and the coffee shops to go to. And, I would just check that out, even if you're just looking for stuff to do in Tulsa, because that's something that we're obviously in the business of branding the city.
Yeah.
And we're trying to convince people that this city is an awesome place to be. And so even if you're here and you've lived in Tulsa for your whole life, like, it's a great place just to see what's popping up.
Yeah, awesome. We were so close to Musk.
I know, yeah. Feels like ages ago, man. Now to think, the type of power he has in our country, it's wild. So,
so going off of the Tulsa is Home brand, something we like to ask all of our guests is, why is Tulsa home to you?
Yeah, I would say, Tulsa has opened up opportunities for me and my family, both with an amazing quality of life in the gathering place, awesome places to eat, professional sports teams to cheer for. My wife and I own some businesses. I don't think that would be possible in a lot of other cities. You really have an opportunity to be a big fish in a small pond, and you're a couple conversations away from somebody who's really going to be able to make change directly on what you care about. And eventually, if you keep having those conversations, you're going to end up, in those conversations too. And I think that Tulsa has enough people to make it fun and enjoyable and create that quality of life that we're looking for, but also small enough to run into people that on the street and see those familiar faces. I think that combination of two things is really unique in our country, and we love Tulsa for it.
Cool. Awesome. Is there anything that you want to touch on that we haven't really dissected with the program, or any highlights that we need to hit?
I don't think so. I mean, I would just say, our members, we haven't talked enough about just our members and the chance that they took in kind of relocating their lives. And, oftentimes it goes back to the root of your question earlier, but like, they're met with love and open arms, and that's what we want. There's also times where they're not. And I would just say, like, before you judge who a Tulsa Remoter is, like, just meet them as a human being and say, this is a new person in this city that's trying to fit in and find their niche. And the more we can welcome these new folks with open arms, the more likely they are to stick around. And ultimately, that's what we all want. So It's been a beautiful thing for the city, and we're grateful that this is such a great place and that we're able to kind of maximize at the right time.
Yeah. Good deal. Well, I appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us.
Of course. Thanks for having me.